Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another lesson. Today, we're going to be talking about how to incorporate evidence effectively, and we're going to learn some strategies on how to ensure that we do that properly for Essay 3. Now, think of yourself as a lawyer in the courtroom. Your job is not just to state an opinion, your job is to persuade. And persuasion only works when your claims are backed by strong, relevant, clearly explained evidence. Now, a strong thesis is arguable, assertive, specific, and supported by evidence. Now, without this evidence, your paper is just opinion. And in this final research paper, opinion will not be enough. Okay, let's talk a little bit about evidence. So, one of the biggest mistakes students make in assuming that once they insert the quote, they are done. You are not done. Dropping a quote into your paragraph is not enough. Every single piece of evidence must be explained. You must tell your reader what it means. So, define and clarify the evidence in context, explain why it matters, connect it to the larger conversation in your paper, and explain how it supports your thesis. So make the logical link explicit. Never assume that the reader sees it. Evidence really only becomes evidence when you connect it to that larger claim, that overarching theme in your essay. Otherwise, it's just going to be information floating on the page. Readers cannot read your mind, so even if something feels really obvious to you, you must spell it out. You must spell out the connection. Now, every body paragraph in Essay 3 should follow a clear structure. First, you're going to state your claim. Then, you're going to provide your evidence. And finally, you'll analyze that evidence. So, the analysis really means that you interpret the evidence in order to support, test, or refine your thesis. So, in general, you should have at least as much analysis as evidence. So, if your paragraph is mostly summary or quotation, then you are not arguing enough. You're just reporting. Essay 3 is not a report, it is an argument. Okay, so after you insert that evidence, you may want to pause and ask yourself, so what? So why does this evidence matter to your argument? What does this imply? So what larger idea or truth does this point toward? How did this happen? What causes or conditions does it reveal? And lastly, how is it connected? Trace the line back to your thesis. All of your evidence should be able to do this. Now, these questions can help you move from summary to analysis, and they help you explain the significance of your evidence. If you cannot answer these questions, your paragraph probably needs a little bit more of an explanation. Okay. In your research paper, your evidence might include direct quotations from scholarly sources, paraphrased research, summary of larger arguments, statistics or data, expert testimony, historical examples, even visuals or charts. But here's the important part. Statistics and visuals don't speak for themselves either, so you want to make sure that you explain them. Otherwise, they're just open to interpretation. You must guide the reader through what the data means and why it supports your overall argument. And of course, make sure that everything is in MLA format. Let's talk about quotations. You should quote when the wording is powerful and precise or authoritative. Maybe the author phrases something in a way that you can't improve it, or maybe you are analyzing their exact language. But you want to make sure you avoid plop quotations or hanging quotations. That is when you just drop a quote in a paragraph without introducing or explaining it. We want to make sure that we integrate the quote. So you'll start with your claim, introduce the author, include the quote, and then analyze immediately. We can also look at it as a quotation sandwich. So you never want to end a paragraph with a quotation either. That almost always signals a lack of analysis. Instead, you want to introduce the author and follow the integrated quotation method right here. Remember, discussing the significance of your evidence develops and expands your paper. So make sure you don't leave any quotations hanging without any analysis. If you hear any galloping, that's my cats. Sorry. All right, let's talk a little bit about paraphrasing and summary. Paraphrasing, if you remember, we talked about this very early on in the semester. Paraphrasing means restating a specific passage fully in your own words, not just swapping out a few words. You should be able to set the source aside and explain the idea as if you were telling it to someone. You still have to cite it. Paraphrasing is often stronger than quoting in an argument research paper because it allows you to stay in control and it's in your own voice. Now, summary is a little bit different. It essentially just gives an overview of a larger text or argument. It is useful for background information or presenting a counter argument. But remember, Essay 3 is not a summary paper, so you are not just explaining what sources say. You are building your own argument using sources strategically. So here's what a weak paragraph may look like. It will probably have the claim, evidence, and then a new point or the next idea. There's really no explanation or connection, and the reader is really left to figure it out. A strong paragraph will look like this. It'll have the claim, evidence, clear explanation of how the evidence proves the claim, and ultimately you control that interpretation. Okay? You can use your sources to support your claim, refute opposing sides, compare experts, or complicate your own argument. Sometimes you might even put a source in conversation with each other. Now that is advanced argument, and you are, of course, encouraged to do that. So when you're revising, you may ask yourself, do I have enough evidence? And I do have some questions here that could help you figure that out. So one of them, the first one is, have I provided evidence for every major assertion? Do I thoroughly explain how my evidence supports my ideas? Do I avoid vague generalization? Do I include and rebut counterargument? Is all my evidence cited correctly in MLA format? So the more controversial your claim is, the more evidence you need to persuade your reader. Strong arguments are built on layers or of well-explained thought. Now here we have revision strategies for evidence. So 2 strategies that will help you immediately strengthen your paper. First, create a reverse outline. So after drafting, write 1 sentence per paragraph summarizing this main point. Then check whether each paragraph clearly supports your thesis. We should be able to trace back all of those ideas back to your original argument. You can also color code your draft. This is another method that you can use. So highlight your claims in one color and your evidence in another and your analysis in a third. If your paper is mostly evidence, then you're summarizing. If it's mostly claims, then you're just providing us your opinion. Strong writing ultimately balances claim, evidence, and analysis in every single paragraph. So at the end of the day, your job really for Essay 3 is not to collect quotes. It's to build a really strong argument. And arguments are built through clear reasoning, strong evidence, and thoughtful analysis. All right, that's it for today's lesson. Thanks so much for listening. Bye-bye.